單止係集體回憶，而係呢個集體回憶咧係唔使錢嘅。咁我估天星俾到大家嘅就係呢一樣嘢，喺過去嗰40幾年裏邊咧，香港嘅經濟係一路咁起飛緊嘅。喺呢個起飛緊嘅同時咧，我哋最美麗、最核心嗰塊地嗰個嘅環境咧，大家係可以走落去。唔使錢咁樣，你可以享用呢個地方啊！而你喺企喺嗰個地方嗰度咧，你係發現咧，你就覺得企喺個香港最核心嘅地方，你覺得呢個地方係令你自豪嘅，即係有共鳴嘅維多利亞景色，你可以話俾人聽，帶朋友嚟話呢個就係我哋嘅香港幾靚咁。咁呢種你會覺得香港嘅經濟發展起飛，你同我都有份嘅。呢種自豪咧，其實可能先至喺個社會上邊咧，係即係喺呢個文物上面嗰個社會嗰個價值係更加大嘅。呢個公共空間就嚟會轉變啦。
咁最熱門而家我哋就講緊呢個天星碼頭嗰個 clock tower 啦。咁嗱，當然而家已經拔咗出嚟冇咗啦。咁如果你話從一個architecture 啊或者係一個甲級嘅一啲世界文明嘅東西，咁當然呢個唔係啦。咁但係對我哋香港人嚟講咧，係真係一個 icon 嚟㗎嘛嚇。咁所以就即係我成日就覺得香港有啲盲點咧，就係唔知道呢啲係乜。
即使法例包括嘅納入我哋古物古蹟條例入邊嘅好過時同埋好不全面，咁你會見到譬如灣仔可能咧，即係成片市區重建。咁淨係某個大額嗰度保護落嚟，咁啊成個中華皇后碼頭就係嗰幾個字，因為過咗50年，其他隔離嗰啲都收過嚟嘅，即係唔係古蹟嘅，因此就冇啦。天星碼頭唔夠50年，即使個條例呢係有效啊，亦都唔令到我哋足以可以係即係保護到嘅。因為 A 佢係唔涵蓋私人嘅財產 ，OK， 私人嘅地方佢唔得。而 B 最主要嘅佢冇錢，咁佢冇錢咧，你點樣可以去即係譬如作賠償啊？私人保育地上邊如果需要保護嗰啲地方，佢即使係喺個法例應該可以保護㗎啦，都令到佢係冇辦法可以有效地保護到咯。
Because something's historic, it doesn't mean that it can't have, economic value as well.
That's right.
And the key thing in Hong Kong, if you look at it, is that we do not accept that buildings can be adapted to different uses. And that's the fundamental problem of the Hong Kong property market. In London, you just apply to the planning guy, and he says, yeah, fine, apartments, and you get on with it. So the whole system of controlling development through lease terms is what causes this problem. Then you get an additional problem where, okay, you can have something that's got a restricted use to it. So to change that use, not even to change the building, but legally to change that use, you'd have to pay the government the difference in value. Now the public sector, which has a lot of these buildings, of course, these guys just view any old building as a chance to knock it down and auction it. And that is something that just through political pressure you can change.
你覺得而家阻止文化保育呢啲方案嘅阻力喺最主要喺邊度？同埋呢個即係要去推出一啲改善嘅方案，有咩難處咧？
我可以講俾你聽，個阻力第一一定唔喺立法會，喺所有呢啲地方咧，我哋係即使冇共識啊，都唔會話夠膽企出嚟 say no 嘅。
呢個大家都同意係文物㗎啦嘛，點解你俾佢喺度食塵？點解冇人 care 呢樣嘢？點解咁耐都唔可以 preserve？ 更加咧就係2年前啦，有香港嘅一啲人咧，就係話自己攞錢出嚟俾政府幫人哋 preserve 咗呢笪地方啦。香港唔可以冇呢啲地方，政府都唔知點做。唔好要啦，唔知點喎。咁問到今天咧都答唔到呢啲問題喎。咁所以點解我哋即係人民會喺度咁樣做呢啲？因為我哋行前佢幾步。我哋望翻轉頭就覺得，喂，政府你行快啲得唔得？咁佢望住我哋就係話，你哋唔知諗啲咩，唔知你哋諗啲乜鬼嘢。喺其他一啲地方咧，人哋就會話 有某一啲東西，呢個係我哋嘅歷史，我哋要保存。咁佢哋係有另外一個法制之下嘅一個系統，係可以用公帑去買翻呢啲咁樣嘅地翻嚟啦。佢就要保存嚇，咁所以就即係呢啲咁樣嘅諗法啊，我覺得係即係要有一個成個社會嘅風氣，即係你着重呢啲東西嚇，我哋願意用公帑，即係用大家嘅資源去保存呢啲東西。咁但我覺得我哋有呢一度又唔係好完整咯。
This is Bridges Street now, or Staunton becoming Bridges Street, and Cane Road is up here, and this entire segment of buildings will be probably demolished. The URA is taking all of this down, I believe, and redeveloping it. But I find this area, this zone between the two streets, extraordinary. Very, very interesting series of communities and terraces and spaces, which I think date before the war. And I'd like to take you through them. So have a look. So as you can hear, someone's playing Beethoven up on one of these windows. Speak in terms of historical importance of these buildings, but I can speak of what's clearly communal importance, that these people do love their homes. Sure that they're a little bit dilapidated, but dilapidated possibly caused by the fact that they're aware that they don't have an investment potential or future potential for investing in upkeeping their buildings, because the society here doesn't seem to value that. So dilapidation is somehow built into the whole issue. It's a vicious circle. You don't respond to investing in heritage. So why should people maintain their buildings? They have no future. They know they have no future. So it's a problem. You know, there's a dilemma to all of this, and that's many members of the community need the compensation, need the money. It's because of this whole issue that their own properties, the own value of their properties have been diminished, because the whole framework of investment in Hong Kong is not set up to preserve heritage. This is all a vicious circle. It's totally understandable a lot of people here are happy to get the money and happy to move. But that doesn't vindicate the whole idea of community and the whole idea of heritage and its importance in the fabric of a city. And I think that diversity in the city, fabric diversity, community diversity is what makes cities come alive. And to turn the cities all into a homogeneous urban zone of podiums and towers must surely impoverish our society here.
So anybody who wants to talk about heritage has to talk about fundamental reform of how the land market in Hong Kong works. And you know, it's not just an emotional issue. So if you want to have a heritage policy, the government actually going to have to pay to compensate people for the development value that they forego. Now these issues are basically called, in law, are basically called compensation and betterment issues, i.e. if a guy develops a site through planning permission and makes a lot of money, he should pay a profit on that to the community. The community take that money and they compensate other people who you don't allow to develop, because the owner of the land hasn't created the value. It's only the society and the economic growth that has made his little piece of land in Causeway Bay valuable. So you get into these issues of compensation and betterment, which then get into issues of redistribution of wealth, of increasing taking away a lot of the revenue generating capacity of the property developers, making profits on development less, actually making the property prices lower. And the government in Hong Kong in the early 1990s had a special commission on this whole issue. They looked into it and they put the report in the bottom drawer. And the report recommended that we introduce a betterment tax on property development profits. So that is the solution. You put on a special betterment levy on property development profits and you use that fund to buy out and compensate people who have buildings of social, historical, architectural, cultural interest, which are not in the public domain.
All I'm saying is that buildings have aura. They're related to context. Like trees and landscape, you can't take it out of the context. And if you try to remove it, replant it, it has an aura. So it's not quite the same thing.
For something like Tamar, they wouldn't build it. You know, you talk about conservation, these existing buildings that the government are perfectly refurbished, you know, perfectly ready for refurbishment, a nice environment and everything. So first of all, because the government doesn't have this free land revenue in Britain, they're very much more careful on how they spend their money. If you wanted to build something like that, they would turn around, they'd put it out to a public tender, and they'd tell somebody to build it, and then they would rent it from them. The people in government who understand the budgeting and understand the money aren't going to tell people who understand heritage. And so, you know, the heritage people don't necessarily understand the finances, and the government just turn around and say, where's the money coming from? Well, the government actually have $910 billion of free reserves. Yes. So we've got lots of money, okay? No, the land revenue only goes to build infrastructure. It does not go to pay doctors' fees, does not go to pay welfare, it does not go to pay education, it pays no operating costs.
So where did the rest of the income come from?
That's from salaries tax, from an accounting trick that they play on the exchange fund, on our investments.
Yes.
That comes in, which only really matches the pension payments, stamp duty, rates, corporation tax. Last year, taxes were 167 billion, even without any other income. And our expenditure was 206 billion. So, and then we've got all the other income. But capital, the land revenue is completely over and above that. They only spend it on infrastructure.
Is it policy or is it a rule or under the basic law? Why?
No, it's an administrative measure that Britain put in the early 1980s because they wanted to make sure that Hong Kong was debt-free after 1997. They didn't want to have China saying, "Oh, you've left money, you know, you're lying." So they said, "Okay, if we take all the land revenue and we use today's money to spend on capital expenditure, so we're the only country or city in the world we pay cash for assets that are going to last 50 years. You know, we write them off. Okay, you want a new road? Bang, cash." And at the moment, if we took the land revenue, even the land revenue we took today, it's $30 billion a year we get the land revenue.
Yes.
And we said, okay, we're going to allocate, for the next 10 years, we're going to take 25% of that land revenue. And we're not going to spend it on new roads, okay? So we're only going to spend $22.5 billion a year on new roads. We've got a static population, okay?
Yeah.
We don't need more schools, you know. So we're not spend 30 billion a year, we're going to spend 22.5 billion, and we're going to take 7.5 billion every year for the next 10 years, and we're going to fund a heritage fund.